Amen. All right, so starting this week, but really in earnest next week, we're going to get into this new series called The Star Still Guides. Today we're talking about two ways that are before us, two ways of thinking, two paths to take. I don't know about you, but this Thanksgiving, I took the path that I take every Thanksgiving to my own chagrin. I usually listen to my eyes more than my stomach, and I just need more turkey. And so I do. And every year, for however many years I've been alive and thinking about this or doing this, I always regret that decision. Anybody else have the same problem that I do? Okay, good. I'm not alone. Excellent. So we do this. And every time I think about two paths, which Jesus is going to talk about as part of his Sermon on the Mount, we're getting toward the end, by the way. We've got just 4 weeks left of this incredible sermon series teaching. And actually, what he has to say is quite relevant to the Christmas story, as you'll see. But whenever I hear about paths that we're supposed to take, I remember a poem by Robert Frost called The Road Not Taken. Now, I know you know what poem I'm talking about. I don't know if you knew this, but 37 states in our union passed a law that said for every commencement celebration that happens at any level, Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken, has to be read. I don't know if that's true or not, but it seems like it's true, because if it's preschool, we're here in The Road Not Taken. If it's elementary, middle school, whatever, all the way up to the graduate level, somebody's going to read or at least refer to The Road Not Taken. Let's read it today, just so you can remember what it says. It is a beautiful poem, even if it is often misunderstood. So he writes, 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood. That means it was fall when he's thinking about this. And sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair and having perhaps the better claim. Because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. So as far as Robert Frost could tell, both paths were equally worn at this point. And both that morning equally lay, and leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Raise your hand if you've ever heard this poem. And one of us loves this poem so much that Catherine decided to clap for it. That's fantastic. Now, this poem is read at every commencement because it just speaks to our rugged American individualism. And that's generally how it is portrayed. Commencement speakers will refer to and challenge those graduates to choose that road not taken, to find your own way, to figure out who you are and go for it, the road less traveled. And that kind of makes sense, and it sort of fits our whole narrative as a nation, or as rugged individuals, we're going to go conquer the world our own way, just like Frank Sinatra did, right? But actually, Robert Frost, when he wrote this poem, that's not what he meant at all. The poem was actually written a little bit in jest to a dear friend of his, whose last name was Thomas. He and this Thomas friend would hike quite a bit together, both in the UK and also in the United States. And Robert Frost recognized a tendency in his friend. And that is that every time they would come to a fork and his friend would have to make a decision, his friend would be filled with anxiety about making the decision. And he was worried that he was going to take the wrong fork in the path and take the loser route and miss some incredible vistas. And anyway, so by the end of every hike, he was always wondering, what did I miss out on? So he was guilty of FOMO before there was FOMO, right? And so that's a very different rendering of this poem than we often hear in commencements. What Robert Frost is really saying and lamenting with his friend is, you're going to have multiple paths to choose from in your life, and the one you choose is going to make a difference. We don't know if that difference is going to be good. We don't know if that difference is going to be bad. But we know the paths you choose are going to make all the difference. That's really the point of the story. And actually, if we can appreciate the original context, we can relate to the angst. Because how many of us, looking back, if maybe we're just mid-hike and we're looking back at our life and our life choices, and we're like, I wish I would have taken a different path on this. Or you're down the path and it's too late to turn back, you can't, and you're wondering, what would life have been like if I'd have taken that other route? What would I be seeing? What would I be missing out on? Two paths diverge in the wood. I took the road less taken, and it has made all the difference. Of course it has. Your choices make all the difference in your life. So Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, he actually ratchets it up quite a bit. He uses hyperbole, which means he's using an orator's technique to draw attention to a contrast. As you'll see as we unpack this, it's not quite as binary as it might sound. But Jesus doesn't hold any punches like Robert Frost does. Robert Frost just simply says, you're all going to make choices, you're going to feel good about some of them, you're going to take your path, and it's going to make all the difference. Duh, right? And of course, yes, it's a beautiful poem, but yes, thank you, Captain Obvious, for making it so clear to us that the choices we make the difference in our life, right? But Jesus really focuses in on it. And he says this, go in through the narrow gate. The gate that leads to destruction is broad and the road wide, so many people enter through it. But the gate that leads to life is narrow and the road difficult, so few people find it. So this is Jesus talking, and it shouldn't surprise us after we've been thinking about this long Sermon on the Mount that he would say something like this. Because throughout this long sermon, which he probably did many places, and what we have is probably just the summary of the things he would do. I imagine that he would unpack a lot of the details of what he's talking about over extended periods of time. So people aren't coming to hear him for a 30-minute sermon, which is maybe how long it would take to read the whole thing. They're coming for the day. This is like seminar time with Jesus. And when he would stop on things like forks in the road, decisions to make, and he would say things like turn the other cheek, go the extra mile, give the shirt off your back. He didn't just blow on past those, but he would unpack them. And he would remind his audience, who is severely oppressed by the Roman government, that the words he's saying are the ways that are going to make the difference for them in their poverty and their powerlessness. So he's saying to those who are so powerless and have very little recourse in their life, that when they get slapped across the cheek by somebody who owns them in some way, to not just simply cower as if to agree with the person that they are worth smacking, but to rise up and look them in the face, forcing that person to make a decision of, do I go the next step of active violence against this fellow human being? This was an act of nonviolence, but nonviolent resistance. When Jesus says go the extra mile, he's not saying, hey, somebody capture that for a cup sometime from an AM/PM store somewhere. He's saying go the extra mile when a Roman soldier forces you to go 1 mile, which they could do by law. You go 2. Because by the time you get to the end of that second mile, the CO is going to see that you have carried this bag too far. And they're going to wonder why the soldier put you through it. This is a way of protesting against the violence of oppression. And when some jerk takes you to court, and you who have nothing but the shirt on your back, and they want more from you in that court of law, take the shirt off your back to make a public statement about how ridiculous this is, that this guy would take you to court in the first place. It draws attention to the audacity of the whole situation and the injustice that's playing out. This is Jesus saying and instructing, you have a choice. You have capacity to do something, but it is a choice. You can stay on the wide path, which is going to lead to more oppression from the Roman government, or you can choose this narrow path, which is tricky and difficult at times because it's so unusual. But there is a way to stand up in nonviolent resistance to those that are hurting you. Will you do it? Will you do it? These are the things that he said over and over again in different ways when he taught about prayer. These are things that are rooted in his Jewish tradition, but not heavily practiced. This intimacy with God, starting the prayer off with our Daddy in heaven. First line, everybody's like, we're talking about a level of intimacy that we have not heard of much before. All of the things that he's talking about, all of the instructions, it's like coming to a fork in the hike. You're going to choose this way of Jesus, which is unusual. It's different. But the guy who's talking says it's going to lead to life. Or do we take the route that everybody else is on, which may be easy, but may be missing the mark? Eugene Peterson, who is his own, was a biblical scholar in his own right, he made his own translation called the Message Translation. And he writes it like this: don't look for shortcuts to God. The market is flooded with surefire, easygoing formulas for a successful life that can be practiced in your spare time. Don't fall for that stuff, even though crowds of people do. The way to life, to God, is vigorous and requires total attention. So remember that Jesus is using strong language here to get our attention toward the end of this long sermon, in which he gave different ways of thinking about everything from who we are, who is blessed, who is not, what is our value, how do we think about others, what do we do with our anger, all these things become choices. And I just want to point out the obvious thing here. The guy who is talking to us is a guy who made these choices to do all these things, and we remember how his life ended. He was arrested on false charges. He was found guilty inappropriately, unjustly, and he was crucified. So that should give us a little pause. The guy who said the narrow way leads to life died a horrible, horrible death. Not a great sales pitch, not a great testament. But here's the thing. No matter what choices you decide to make, if you choose to do that wide path that everybody's on and everybody's singing the same songs and doing the same thing, which means the world's going to stay exactly the same way it has been for a long time. If you choose that way and live your life that way, or you choose this narrow path, guess what one thing is going to happen eventually? You're going to die. It's inevitable. The choice that Jesus is putting before us is not whether or not you're going to die. It's whether or not you're going to live until you die. And what kind of life do you want to lead? What kind of life, when you're at that point, do you want to look back on and say, I'm glad I took those choices. I'm glad I made those choices. Those choices are often, this narrow path, are often counterintuitive and countercultural. We are a very efficient culture where we pride ourselves on getting things done quickly, on profit, speed, all of that. Several years ago, we were on our way as a family to Aspen, Colorado in the summer, when it's moderately affordable to get together in this beautiful mountain village. And we were going to get there to have a family reunion of sorts, and rented a couple condos and stuff so we could hang out and do the trails and enjoy the city and good food and all that. On the way there, we stopped off for a couple nights in Moab, Utah. Anybody ever been to Arches National Park? Yeah, it's fantastic. It's also fantastically hot, but it's fantastic. And if you're there in the middle of summer, you find out real quick, you got to be out the door at like 7 a.m. or else you are going to absolutely fry. But it was absolutely stunning. Highly recommended, worth the road trip to get there. It's glorious, it's wonderful, expansive, mind-blowing, all the things that national parks generally are. It's incredible. And then we went in town, took a nap, did some good food that night. And the next day, we made our final leg of the journey all the way to Aspen. It was only going to be a few hours, not that bad. And so we had a decision to make. Well, actually, as a driver, I had a decision to make. And I wasn't sure how happy my travelers were going to be that I was carting around. We could go right back from Moab, right up to the freeway, and make our way faster to Aspen. Or we could take a sign that I saw that called for the scenic bypass. Ooh. Well, guess which one I chose? Yeah, Lynn figured out, pretty quick. Where are we going? I'm like, scenic bypass. This sounds awesome. And Lynn was skeptical about this. Are you sure that this could be, who knows where this is going to end up? And my kids were like, more time in the car. But then as we made our way to when this thing really started to open up, we realized that we had found a gem. That this path, which was going to be this route, which was going to be slower than the freeway, also is taking us along with the river, which had cut hundreds and hundreds of feet down from the canyons above us. And there we were, enjoying cliff after cliff, mile after mile after mile, and nobody was on the road with us. It was spectacular. And believe it or not, even my young children agreed that was the right choice. Well, that was the right choice for a road trip, even though it made us go a little bit slower. But my guess is that you have had some of those moments in your life, not about a literal road trip, but about decisions that you've made where you came to a fork in the road. You sense this is the way that lots of people are saying I should go, but I really feel I need to go this way. And I think you would agree in those situations, even though it may have been a difficult decision, that it was a decision that helped build the life that you actually wanted. For some of you, it has to do with the idea of grace or forgiveness, because that's a whopper for everybody. And our culture is sort of a, you get yours kind of a thing. And we want justice, which means you're going to pay for what you did. And maybe in your course of life, you've came to that juncture and you're like, yeah, I could keep following that for a while and hold on to that. Or we could just make this thing free and start over. Let's choose forgiveness and grace. And you choose that, and you find yourself more free because you've let the need to exact punishment go. Maybe for you in a country that is constantly focused on economy and constantly decries the worry of scarcity. There's never enough, so hold on tighter. Maybe for you, it was a decision to be generous in the face of the call for scarcity. And you found out that being generous in itself provided its own gift to you, that you felt more joy because you chose to share your stuff. There's all kinds of ways that we do this in our life, and I'm sure that you have done this. A lot of times when we read Jesus here, and in fact, I know that I've preached on this many times over 30 years, and most of those years have been here. So you've probably heard, if you've been here for the long haul, you've probably heard me teach on this a couple of times. And probably in my earlier years, I didn't notice the binary problem. I probably even preached this as I know it's preached a lot still today. Whereas you got to make a decision, people. Right now, we're going to have an altar call. Which way are you going to go? You're going to go with the wide path that leads to destruction, going to ruin your life, or are you going to choose Jesus and his narrow path? As if it was a singular decision. But it's not a singular decision. It's a multitude of decisions. Now, I will say, and I'll give you a quote from C.S. Lewis from our reading, the book that we've been looking at, that there is a tension here. Another author by the name of John Maxwell, he would say it like this, in reference to another verse that's going to be coming up in a few weeks. And he would say, if Jesus is not Lord of all of your life, then Jesus is not Lord at all in your life. And there's a truthiness to that. Now, what is your overriding North Star? We're going to lean into that a lot with this next series about the star still guides. And yet there's a part of that that just seems, too contrasted to live on the daily. Maxwell would go on to say, and C.S. Lewis echoed this in his writing, that the most miserable people in the world are those that are trying to straddle both, where they've got one foot in the way that the world seems to run by, that operating system, which is all about, and at least in our time and culture, often focused on greed and success and personal gain, rugged individualism, all that. Meanwhile, Jesus is calling us to radical generosity, radical hospitality, shalom for all, and eventually we're doing the splits. And that's a hard way to do life. So Maxwell says the most miserable people in their lives are those who are trying to straddle both because you cannot. Now, there's some truth to that too. I think what Jesus is really getting at in terms of living in the real world is that you're going to be faced with multiple decisions all the time, every day. What decisions are you going to make? This isn't a one and done decision, although that's helpful to claim. All right, I'm going to choose to try to live my life by the way of Jesus as best I can. That's a great decision to make, in my opinion. I think that's a great start, but it's a start. It's an aspiration. And the aspiration is meaningless unless it actually hits the road of your life. And so you're going to have lots of decisions to make. But how do you get there? How do you protect that so that you can stay on the right path? I give you C.S. Lewis here, who wrote, "That is why the real problem of the Christian life comes where people do not usually look for it. It comes the very moment you wake up each morning. All your wishes and hopes for the day rush at you like wild animals. And the first job each morning consists simply in shoving them all back and listening to that other voice, taking what other point of view, letting that other larger, stronger, quieter life come flowing in, and so on all day. Standing back from all your natural fussings and frettings, coming in out of the wind. We can only do it for moments at first. But from those moments, the new sort of life will be spreading through our system. Because now we are letting Christ work at the right part of us. That is the difference between paint, which is merely laid on the surface, and a dye or stain, which soaks right through. What Jesus is calling for are daily decisions, multiple daily decisions, that together form a process that leads to the life that we actually want. The question then is, which life do you actually want? Which one are we most interested in having? Some other things that C.S. Lewis says, which I think are hopeful. Starting the day with this, how many of you start the day with a daily affirmation or devotion or something like that? On your best day, at least, you start with something like that? Right. I say best day because we all know this is something we should do. And yet, if you're at least like me, on some days, I get caught up with the emails I need to respond to, or I catch a news headline that I can't get away from, or the busyness of the day, or there's this chore I need to do. And before I know it, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I haven't really thought about being shalomy at all. And I look back on my day and wish that I'd started it with that decision, to choose shalom for the day. There's some good news, though, that the more we do this over time, if we get off track and forget, we're probably not going to go off the rails. You know what I mean? I've been doing this Christian thing for many decades, I'm probably not, if I forget to do a daily affirmation or do my devotions or say a prayer in the morning, I'm probably not going to be an axe murderer by the end of the day, right? Because you start to build muscle memory. This is who we are. This is the rhythm of what we're about. And so that can happen for us in this daily choosing. I also want to state something really obvious for you. Sometimes when we hear Jesus saying this kind of thing, it feels like he's a commanding officer for some. I remember talking about this years ago, and we had one of our dear old saints, say out loud after we're talking about what Jesus was inviting us to do with our lives, like actual decisions. And at the end of it, she was like, "Oh, that sounds exhausting." This following Jesus thing. Why'd you have to make it so hard, right? Here's the deal. You're going to be making decisions no matter what. You're going to have decision fatigue no matter what, because life is filled with one decision after another. Following Jesus is just a path to take that he says is going to lead to life, not just for you, a better, richer, deeper life, one that is closely aligned with the presence and spirit of God helping you along your way. Choices, nonetheless. To say, well, I'm not going to do that because I don't want all those choices is ridiculous, because you're going to have choices no matter what. And most likely, if you're not thinking about it at all. And if you haven't developed the muscle memory to naturally incline yourself toward shalom, it's very likely that your natural choice is always going to be toward that wide path that doesn't lead to the life that you really, really want. I mean, seriously, if you really think about this, what do you really want? On the surface, maybe you just want a little more money in your pocket and want some safety and all that stuff. But what do you really, 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 really want? You want to know you're loved. You want more love for yourself and your life. You want more love for other people that you love. You want them to be well. And if you really go further, you even want well-being for people that you can't stand, maybe even hate from a distance. And the reason you do is not because you wish them well and want them to win the lottery or something, but you know that if they become healed, if they become truly well, they're not going to be the jerks that cause you to hate them, right? And if everybody is more and more increasingly well, then all of a sudden communities become increasingly well also. And a lot of the problems that we see are alleviated. This is the dream. I mean, yeah, it sounds great at a beauty pageant. I want world peace. But the way of Jesus actually gives a pathway to pursue that. Intrapersonally, interpersonally, communally, globally. What do you want? Jesus finally gives us this a few statements later, toward the end of middle of Matthew. He says this, just another framework. This is in response, by the way, to a hyper-legalistic atmosphere and leaders that were telling people to do all of these things as if their faith depended on it. And Jesus looked at that kind of living your life in a legalistic way, a punch list way, and he said, are you tired of that, worn out from that, burned out on religion because of what you're told to do? Well, come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. That's the way of Jesus. It doesn't mean there aren't going to be difficult parts of the path. There are. But look who you're with and look where it's taking you. You're going to find out throughout this series that the themes that close out the Sermon on the Mount actually align really well with the Christmas story. These are the primary characters that make up the birth narratives of Jesus. You have Elizabeth and Zechariah. They're the ones who in their old age conceived and gave birth to John the Baptist, Jesus' distant cousin. You may have heard of Mary and Joseph. All these people, by the way, have decisions to make. They're asking, which gate should I go through? Which path should I take? Which star in the sky do I choose to follow? For Mary and Joseph, you know that story well enough that you could probably fill in the blanks. But what about the villagers and the innkeepers? You recognize that they had their own choice to make, their own path? I mean, imagine this. You're in a part of the world that celebrates radical hospitality. Like it's unheard of to not welcome in a stranger, especially somebody who is in need. So you know the story enough to know that people are coming to Bethlehem if we just roll with the story. And so the town is packed and all the homes are filled and the inns are full and all that. But here comes Mary, pregnant as can be, about to pop, right? She's in agony for what she's going through. And they're knocking on doors. Who in their right mind in that culture would look at Mary and say, sorry, we have no room for you in this home? It's crazy to think about. Crazy. And the best this whole village could come up with is go to the cave in the backyard with the barn animals. That's where we'll make room for you. It's crazy. By the way, just a reminder that when we read the birth narratives of Jesus, it is really wise not to get hung up on the literal interpretation of the story. but to back up the truck and wonder what are the authors of these stories trying to help us understand about the character and nature of God and the complexity of the human experience. When we get caught up in the details, we find ourselves tripped up and struggling with our doubt. When we back up and recognize that there's a bigger story that's being told, we can ride with the whole thing and sing the carols more loudly. These kinds of questions. What about the villagers? What about the other innkeepers? What does that say about human beings and our capacity to, in the face of great need, so obvious, a pregnant woman about to give birth, that somehow we can say no to that? It means it's possible for us, that there are paths right before us to take, and we can choose the easy one because it's more comfortable. Well, the Magi, you know about those guys. Those are the wise men from the east. They were stargazers, and they sensed from the stars they were supposed to head that direction and found it leading them right to Bethlehem. But then you have King Herod, also part of that wise men story. And King Herod, threatened by the power, wanted to do Jesus in. You remember what he chose, the path that he chose, which was the path of power. And you remember the choice that led the soldiers at Bethlehem to make. Let's not let the soldiers off the hook here, right? Don't you remember that the wise men didn't go back to Herod? They went back another route because they didn't want to let Herod know where this child was, because they had a hunch that something was going to go very, very wrong. Within 2 years, Herod sends soldiers to wipe out the young boys 2 years and older, as the story goes. Horrible on Herod, but what about the soldiers? Now, recently, some of our own senators in our own government sent out a large-scale announcement, an FYI, to the United States military to inform them that it is illegal for them as soldiers to follow an unlawful order, even from the very top, which was very upsetting to the very top. Well, even if that law was not on the books, what about the moral center for these soldiers? Narrow path, wide path. Which way do we go? All of these stories, you, me, everyone who has ever lived, we're faced with these decisions all the time. What decisions are you facing now? What's the easy, wide path? What might the voice of the Spirit of God be whispering in your ear that's going to lead to life? It can be big and small. It doesn't have to be this massive thing, but perhaps it is. What is the whisper of the Spirit calling you to do? That's the question that's with us all the time, every day. Jesus saying, I'm here. Trust me. It's going to deliver more of the life you really, really want if you'll trust me. Let's pray together. God, I don't know all the things that are happening in the hearts and minds and lives of everybody who is listening right now. I don't have to. But you know, you see, you hear. And I don't pretend that our lives are not filled with great complexity that require nuanced thought and action. I know that they do. Yet I also believe that at any given time, the whisper toward shalom offers options, offers ways, not just one, but perhaps multiple options for us to move forward in love, move forward in well-being and peace, to move away from the ways of destruction to ourselves and other people. Congregation, how is the whisper of the Spirit of God speaking to you today? In our myriad choices, Spirit of life and love, may we find ourselves more than not choosing love and life as you have invited us to do. And may our lives be richer and fuller for it. May our relationships be richer and fuller for it. May the world be more healthy because we all chose the same. Help us move forward in grace and love. Amen.